We've reached 7 p.m., so welcome to the Manhattan City Commission meeting for Tuesday, September 21st, 2021. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, next item on the agenda is Commissioner comments. So why don't we start with Commissioner Morris, who's joining us via Zoom.
Thank you, Mayor. I would just like to call attention, Raleigh County Police Department is sponsoring a national night out, and many of you are aware that some communities have that event every year. We have in the past have gone with Manhattan Day, right, Ron? And I've lost track of that. But anyway, it's October 5th from 4 to 8 p.m. at City Park. And I also want to just recognize and mark the passing of Cheryl Collins, such an important and valuable keeper of history here in our community. And so she's worthy of mentioning. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Redding.
Yes, thank you. Just want to let the public know that the Eisenhower Rec Center ribbon cutting is this weekend, Sunday at 2 o'clock, I think. Sunday at 2 o'clock. Everybody's welcome to attend. This is from the sales tax initiative that was passed for the rec centers and the trails and parks and such. So, Anthony, we did that a little while ago in the summertime. Now it's time for Eisenhower. Hopefully a lot of you can come and celebrate and see the facility right along with us. October 12th is the last day to register to vote in the general election, and the advanced voting starts October 13th. So if you are new to Manhattan, or you've had a change of address, or your last name has changed since the last time you voted, this would be a good time to just get on the Riley County Elections website and see the status of your registration, and if it has changed, to go ahead and redo that. I went to the last third Thursday in downtown last week, and it was really fantastic. And I don't know what we're going to be seeing in the future, but I hadn't been there before when the streets were blocked off, and this time the streets were blocked off, and that made it really fun environment. The weather was perfect. There was pickleball tournaments, and there was the axe throwing stuff going on, and of course the air guitar contest. So it was very lively and vibrant and exciting part to see in Manhattan, and I hope we can do more of that. And I thought last Thursday was a huge success, but only the businesses can really tell us if it was just the streets that were vibrant, or if there was also revenue made in their restaurants and such. So I'm looking forward to hearing more about that. Commissioner Morris mentioned Cheryl Collins, an icon in our community. And a few months ago, maybe not a few months ago, but Judy Davis had also passed away from the Crisis Center. Very sad for both of these two individuals, which were huge in our community. I do want to congratulate Kathy Ray, the new executive director for the Crisis Center. And I know of Kathy on a personal level. When I had personal issues in my life a few years ago, she was the first one I turned to when it comes to sexual violence, sexual assaults, or whatever it might be. She was a huge strength for me when I was first trying to figure out what to do with my life and where I was at that time. So I want to congratulate her, welcome her to Manhattan. I believe she's coming from Topeka, and I think she's going to be very stellar in her new position at the Crisis Center. Thank you.
Sorry. The Food and Farm Council is working on their system plan and seeking community input, and that is going pretty well. They've reported this afternoon that 1,500 people have completed that survey. It takes an average of 8 minutes to do. You can do it by going to nourishtogether.org and complete the survey either in Spanish, English, or they have Mandarin as well. So if we could get over 2,000 of those surveys completed, and even they need some outside of the city of Manhattan to represent the rural areas and the food systems, that would be really important information to build on as they build that system out into April. Thank you.
Okay, I'm looking forward to seeing the dedication of the Eisenhower, Recreation Center, but I do want to request from Parks and Rec, no basketball competition. We've proven we're not any good at it. Let's move on to the consent agenda. The items on the consent agenda are those of a routine and housekeeping nature, or those items which have previously been reviewed by the City Commission. A commissioner may request an item be moved to the end of the general agenda. Does the commission have any questions or comments on any of the consent agenda items?
Mayor, on the steering committee for the housing study, I think it's great that you made all the selections with our input on it. We did receive an email from the chamber, and I think there may have been a chamber representative not on there. One of the things we discussed at our work session, I think last time, or maybe a couple of sessions ago, where we were going to have a Fort Riley representative also be on it and to represent Fort Riley. I wasn't sure if that's something we can do for the chamber as opposed to opening it up all over again. So that's just something I'd like for us to consider.
I think if we want a chamber member on there, we'll have them give us a recommendation. We'll just add number 16, because I'd hate to kick someone off that we've already appointed.
Exactly.
We can do the same with Fort Riley. We get a Fort Riley rep, and that'll be number 17, and that's probably the easiest way to handle that,
Right.
because they did miss the deadline because whatever.
Right.
But I think if we go with that, if that's fine with everybody, we'll just do that.
Yes, thank you.
I've got a couple of questions on, or comments at least. On item C, which is the budget, upon further deliberation with myself, I have decided that I'm going to vote against this year's budget, mostly because we, with the recent census survey information that had come out, it continues to be Manhattan area is flat, Pot County area is one of the fastest growing parts of the state, and I think we all agree that that the main reason is because of lower property taxes and in theory a slightly lower cost of living over there. And so if we're ever going to sort of stop that sort of flow to the east, we have to at some point try to make Manhattan a little bit more affordable. And so I would like, I suspect it's a goner for this year to the budget that we have here, but moving forward, it's going to take all of us, the county commission, the school board, the law board, the library board, and the city commission also to stand firm and try to, there's a balance between trying to be all things to all people and provide services to the people. A lot of times there ends up being a smaller group that demands some kind of services where there's a lot of people that don't care about those services. And when each individual small group starts getting their thing that a lot of other people don't want, people end up paying for things they don't want and need. And so it becomes a big issue of, it drives the cost of everything up and it drives the expense to the taxpayer of everything up. And so going forward here, as we get into the next budget year, I was serious as I could be about trying to make sure next year, between the ARPA money and the sales tax money, we've got to do something to get the property tax down, at least for a few years. We don't want to get addicted to the COVID money, like people say, and then have to keep paying that every year. But we need to do something to kind of give us a little bit of a break. And so that's it for that. The second one is item G, which is the item G3, which is the awarding of the fire suppression system for $500,000 down at the parking garage. If this was a private sector deal and 6 months from opening up a parking garage or a building or some kind of a project, the code department suddenly springs on the developer or the person building it. It's like, oh, wait, now suddenly you need a $500,000 fire suppression system. It's like, it's one thing to sort of do it to ourselves through our own code services department, but if, looking at this, if we were a private sector business trying to do this and we suddenly got sprung on us, I would be livid as could be, because you got a building permit, you got a building permit. Build what you said you were gonna build, and if it wasn't okay the first time, then don't pass it the first time. And so somebody give me some kind of explanation, because we didn't have $200,000 to make it a pretty looking parking garage, but now we got $500,000 to spend on something that's probably never gonna be used. Help me out here.
Jason Hilgers, Deputy City Manager. There's quite a history to it. It's not just all of a sudden we found this discrepancy. So the architect originally submitted it to code prior to bidding the project with a fire suppression system. There were debates throughout many months as to whether or not it was going to be required. Knowing the first floor was going to be occupied, we knew the first floor was going to be sprinkled. We knew the connection to the rally house was going to be sprinkled. The debate then came over Walker's experience, over McCown Gordon's experience across the nation, and what our local code would require. It was missed. It was missed because it didn't make it in the bid documents. When they went to get their building permit and code looked at those documents, they were not consistent with what originally was submitted with the fire suppression system. It was missed. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It should have been in there. It wasn't. And in Manhattan, a 4-story structure or taller will have fire suppression.
Even though it's an open-air thing made of concrete.
Correct.
That seems unbelievably silly, but it's, yeah. So that's fine. I'm going to vote against it just because it just stinks. There you go.
Understood.
All right, I mean, I had a similar reaction. When you see a change order, we expect change orders, but that seemed to be overlooked. But after talking with Ron, having fire sprinkler systems is normal now, so I was surprised that it was missed. And my understanding is even the other garage, and even the K-State garage, and all of them have it. So I don't know how such a item like that could be overlooked. Mainly because of code. That's what we expect of all of our buildings, is to have that in there. So it's unfortunate that it comes with such an expense. But I also want to make sure, is there a maximum price for these contracts? So it's likely that we might see more change orders, as much as I hate to see them, and I hope we don't see any more change orders to this. But is there a maximum? I forgot what the actual term is. For this contract for the garage.
Yeah, it's in the paperwork in the packet, so it increases the guaranteed maximum price. This is the only change order we've brought to you on this project.
So it's only increased by this much then?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, just to follow up, because I do think Mark brings up a good point. A concrete parking garage, and then the code's worried about a 4-story building. Seems like they're two different things. Is our code wrong? Did we cause that in our local code, or is that a federal state code?
It's the code that we've adopted locally.
So we're
It's
guilty
in-
of causing it.
Well, the requirement and the regulation's been there. You're talking about an interpretation.
Right.
And once you got to Manhattan, I mean, this thing's 8-10 feet from a building that was built over 100 years ago. I mean, strong winds at Strasser Village when it was on fire easily could have jumped the road. I mean, it's for everybody's safety to have this there. It's the preference. If we were back 18 months ago, we'd be talking to you about why we need a fire suppression system. It was missed. There's no argument the error was made. But staff would be here advocating for a fire suppression system.
Okay, that's good enough. So other comments? Are there any public comments on the consent agenda?
Mayor?
Oh, Linda, go ahead.
Yes, hi. I want to I was disappointed too about the additional cost for the parking garage, but I don't know how to fix it. If the national standard is that we have to have it, then it's safety-wise, whether a car is burning or not, that we have it. So I'm gonna probably support it. The other thing is the One Gas Foundation has given this wonderful grant to Sunset Zoo for $57,000, and that is terrific news. With regard to the budget, I am as concerned as anyone else about raising the budget, but I also think that as we are recovering from COVID, this recovery is so uneven. So the national statistics on the housing prices have increased 16%. And I read that today I read UPS is raising their rates 6%. There's just every day and when I go to the grocery store or a restaurant, the prices have gone up significantly. I am not interested, and our city employees did not get raises last year. I am not interested in punishing our city employees. I want to be as fair-minded as possible, and I would agree that maybe next year we have to be less, but right now we're in a catch-up mode and we're competing. We can easily lose employees to someone who's paying the higher rate, and they are using COVID money in some cases to augment some of these salaries. So I feel compelled to support the current, or the budget that we have put forth. And with regard to, what was the other item here? The salary ordinance, I did talk with Ron because I thought we were going to wait until the pay study was done and put the rate, implement the pay, but he pointed out that these raises next year will be will be implemented all throughout the year on the employee's anniversary date. And so it's such a variable, you can't just, and I think it's important to know that the firefighters and the city administration have negotiated this rate, and that both parties are satisfied with the raise. And I'm pleased to finally have a public art policy, and I'll be happy that we're moving forward with that and not dragging our feet. So thank you.
Are there any public comments on the consent agenda items? Okay, seeing none, we'll close public comments. Are there any other commissioner comments? I want to just make one. Of course, I'm going to agree with Mark. I'm not going to support the budget, but I want to be a little bit more specific. I understand that, the city staff didn't get any pay raises last year, but neither did the citizens. And so it's one of those cases where, we get emails, and got a long letter from a gentleman today, and, their view is, city staff didn't get fired last year. They were taken care of. They sacrificed in COVID, just like the taxpayer. And they might take the viewpoint of, why are you punishing the taxpayer? Because they didn't get raises. And Commissioner Morris is correct, we're getting some serious inflation on everything. But that doesn't mean the taxpayers paying property tax got a raise and can afford it. I think we've really failed to take the, federal money and use it to offset that. And I think we could have by giving bonuses and things like that for the city staff for working during COVID. That wouldn't have changed their salary as far as retirement, but it would have made a difference and rewarded the great work that everybody on the staff did last year. The other thing is, I've always been pounding the drum on lean management, and I'm just disappointed we didn't go through this budget and look at specific line items. And I'm not gonna do that tonight because I'd bore you with 14 pages of stuff. But I'm just gonna mention two. One item in there says $10,000, city commission travel. And I've always been the guy that's, mentioned that, I think, every year. We spend too much money on travel. I think Commissioner Morris during the coordination session wanted to know how much was being spent on the AUSA conference. And there's $10,000, I'm sorry, if you're into lean management, that can go. That can help pay somebody a bonus working on city pools. It doesn't need to go to city commission travel. I'm also pretty hardcore, I know Ron probably didn't like my comment today on the radio, but where I mentioned, well, one of our city managers unfortunately resigned. I would just not rehire the position. And I know that's a big chunk of salary, and that means Jason's got to work harder. I fully understand that also, but maybe the city commissioner could require a few less PowerPoint slides, and therefore it would work out. But we need to take some hard looks at things like that, and we could start chipping away at this. And it is about putting the money where it needs to go, so that we can keep the key things open and get rid of the waste. And that's where I'm at. So I obviously can't support what we've got right now. It needs to be significantly lower than what it is. So.
I will make a couple of comments to that as well. The burden falls on us as city commissioners about the workload we give our staff. So every time we get projects or any initiatives we want our staff to take on our behalf, that adds to their workload. So we either need to slow down our project pace or stop giving them more stuff to do. Or if we want them to do all things for all people, then we need to make sure they have the resources and the staff necessary. Earlier, we discussed an individual in our community who needed other issues looked at their home. Staff can do that 24/7. We have some of them replying on weekends, some of them working after 5 or 6 o'clock in the evening, taking time away from their own family where there's no work-life balance. So that responsibility falls on us, on how much responsibility we want to take away from them so that they can have that balance. But if we want them to be healthy physically and mentally and work to their full capacity and retain them, then it falls on us on what we do to compensate them for that time. So I don't think this is a disservice to our staff. This is exactly what they need. In fact, they do so much, it's even hard to quantify it. I know when I was a school teacher, you had to be a social worker, a therapist, a teacher, and teach everything all the time, be 100% every single day. And that's kind of where our staff is right now. They have to be at their 100% every single day with less and less. And so I think it's just due diligence that we do at least this much for our staff and for our community. The community expects their roads, potholes to be filled whenever they need it. They need people to respond to their reported app as soon as they get those reports in. So we're making it faster and more efficient. But I think this is not something that I take lightly as far as property taxes or sales taxes or revenue resources. It is something I take extremely seriously, and I think this is, at least for this budget, I will be supporting this budget.
Hello. So I also will, I guess, make some comments on the budget. It's a little hard to find the right word, but it seems kind of nuts to me that there's a ton of hand-wringing and worrying about the property taxes. Do we move it or we don't? And we're talking about just on a $200,000 house, about $2 a month when it comes to city services. When it comes to this, 71% of this mill doesn't go to the city services and the problems that this commission and the city manager's office has the authority to address and what we're asking for the increase over. It goes to our CPD, it goes to the library, it goes to the Manhattan Fire Department, different funds in there, but to the general fund, it's a small amount. It's You know, if people are moving to Pot County over $2 a month, that's not the issue. And so to try to deflect it to that is kind of nuts to me. What we're also doing is not addressing the 2 years of problems that we've heard before COVID, and, you know, maybe a decade. I think the only person on the commission that hasn't been here for quite a while or before. And so we're saying, you know, somehow this is a new problem, and we're the ones to fix it. Well, what have we been doing for a decade? And we want to do more of the same? I don't think that that's going to solve the problem, the retention issues. You want to celebrate people leaving. That's the problem. We can't get, why won't they stay? How do we get better talent here? How do we keep them? Where do we recruit? We asked for $2 to help with that on a $200,000 property, and we're sitting up here wringing our hands over it, saying we got to get, spend all this federal money and find all this other way to do it. I think what we need to do is be honest and explain the situation. And of course, Mark's right. A vast majority of the funding and the property taxes comes from your schools and your fire department and your police department. And maybe you want to fund those things. Maybe they're important. But this is just kind of nuts to me.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Aaron, but, again, that's the spin that the taxpayers get concerned about when we say, oh, it's RCP, it's the library. No, that's the commission's fault. We own both of those. We appointed the people on there. We did the charter ordinance, so I just don't buy that. And the people that send me emails, they don't really care to say that Ron only controls this piece of it. They're looking at total property tax picture. County figured it out. They didn't raise theirs. So, that's where I'm at on it. But anyway, it's not worth beating a dead horse, I don't think. So we can move on from there. If somebody'd like to make a motion?
Do we need to make an amendment for the appointments? Okay. So I move that we adopt the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. City Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Mayor Butler,
Yes, except no on item C, budget-related, number 1 and number 2. But yes on number 3 and 4.
Commissioner Morse,
Yes.
Commissioner Hattasol,
Yes, except for items number C1 and G3, A and B.
Commissioner Estabrook,
Yes.
Commissioner Reddy,
I guess I'm a little confused. So for the budget-related items, isn't it all or nothing? You just, okay. Well, I'm yes.
No, that's 4 items. I don't have a problem with the fire department thing, but, I voted no on the budget and on the salary thing.
I thought the fire one is also a salary issue.
It is, but it's different.
All right. Either way, yes.
okay, motion carries 5-0 with the exception of the budget item C1 that carried 3 to 2, and item G3, A and B, which carried 4 to 1.
Yeah, and I think item 2 on that budget should be what, 4-1? Yeah, C2.
I'm sorry. Yes,
C2 is
C2,
4-1.
3, and 4 carried 4 to 1.
No,
Nope.
just 2.
Just C1 and C2?
Nope, just 1 was 3 to 2, 2 was 4 to 1, C and D were 5-0.
Yep, we got it. All right, we straight on that?
Okay,
Okay, appreciate it. All right, that brings us to our one item that's on the general agenda, which is levy project, bid concurrence, betterments and options and payment authorization. And I guess, Brian, you're gonna take the lead on this time?
Yep, I got the lead on this one.
Thank you.
Commissioner Morris, can you see the PowerPoint? Great. Well, good evening, Mayor, Commissioners. Brian Johnson, City Engineer, along with Melissa Corkle, the Branch Chief of Civil Works for the United States Army Corps of Engineers out of the Kansas City District. Tonight's item is a culmination of 2+ decades of study, planning, analysis, and design of Manhattan's levee system. Tonight's action represents a once-in-a-generational opportunity to bring a critical piece of stormwater infrastructure into the 21st century. Reinforcing gate wells, sizing culverts for today's runoff and storm events, adding pumping capacity, and separation of safety improvements and operational improvements are all needed pieces of this infrastructure that protects $1.4 billion, that's with a B, of public-private investment and economic activity, as well as 11,000 citizens, about 20% of our population. So tonight's agenda, we're going to talk a little bit about the background, and I know we've talked about this quite a bit, so I'll go pretty fast on that. We'll talk about the public partnering agreement review. We'll talk about the base project and the betterments. We'll talk a little bit about financing, and then we'll ask for some direction for the December rate discussion for stormwater. So for the background section, you all know this. We'll go through it pretty quickly. The existing levee didn't perform as designed in 1993. We all are very well aware of that. 1993 event was about a 75-year event, so it wasn't a 100-year event. That lack of performance is what initiated the study in 1999 or 1998. The initial study was completed in 2004 and confirmed the observations from 1993. The initial study said that in a 100-year event, which this levee has not had to fight against, 100-year event, there's a 50-50 chance that that levee fails. In 2015, those improvements to bring the levee up to current standards was identified. The USACE Civilian Review Board concurred with the recommendations for improvements, and then we submitted for federal funding. In 2017, federal funding for design and construction was approved. In 2018, a design agreement between the city and the United States Army Corps of Engineers was approved. And in 2019, a public partnership agreement was approved. Agreement for design was approved in 2018. Design started and identified parcels for acquisition. In addition to the structural components that are going into the levee, in total, we've acquired almost 50 easements, and some of those easements are temporary easements, which means they have a window. So we have a window of construction that we need to meet in order to keep those easements active. The public partnership agreement, it was approved in 2019. That started final design and acquisition. Cost share of $65.35 was set, and the first payment was made towards the project. The casement and haze gatewell, which is what a lot of tonight's discussion is going to center around, was appropriated at an 85-15 split at that time. 85 city, 15% Corps of Engineers. And a little later on, I've got a slide that's going to talk about how the Corps of Engineers has really come to the plate and stepped up to help us with financing that. Levee improvements. So what is the levee improvement project? It raises the levee between 1/2 foot and 3.5 feet high, nearly the entire length of the levee, about 5 miles, 29,000 lineal feet. So almost the entire levee is raised. We construct 4 large seepage berms to seal the dry side of the levee to prevent piping, which was a problem in 93. We had quite a bit of piping, actually. We replaced 6 gate wells. We reinforced the others. We installed 8,000 feet of under seepage collection. So think of your house with your sump pump. drain tile. It's an oversized drain tile is what it looks like, and it collects water, gets it to a pump, throws it up over the levee. 8 new relief well locations, as well as a stop log gap at Union Pacific Railroad. And I want to talk about that for a minute because we are still in communications with UPRR. This project does not include those stop gaps. Corps of Engineers in the city will continue to work on sensible and reasonable solutions. We have narrowed the area down to 3 possible improvements in this area. However, we do not have a permit from the court or from the railroad yet to go do work on their property. We're still working on that. So this is the overall project. Again, starts Casement and Hayes with the new Gatewell. Here is your relief wells, along with here. And
Hey, Brian, okay. Can you explain some of the lingo as you go? What
Sure.
is a gate well?
so the Gatewell is the structure that the water runs from the dry side through the levee to the wet side.
With some kind of a stop thing, so if the water
It's got a
comes-
flap gate on it and it's got a sluice gate on it, both.
Okay,
So the flap gate closes when the water on the wet side gets higher than the dry side. We also have a stop gate that we can close down.
okay, thank you. Okay,
The relief wells are in here, as well as here and here. And those are those wells that draw water from the dry side, throw it up over to the wet side, so that the dry side doesn't get saturated. We have some ponding areas down here. We have under seepage berms here, here and here. And then we also have gate wells that are reinforced over in this area. Those gate wells stay, however, we do make significant improvements to them. So financially, let me go back one. Payments to date. So where are we at financially? $600,000 was paid for initial design in 2019. $1 million was paid in 2020 to get the final design and bid. Prior to bidding, our share of what we anticipated the base project would be was paid of $5.035 million, which was 35% of the base project. So total payments to date is about $6.864 million, and then we have credits of about $2 million. So total, we have about $8.864 million. I don't want to say in the bank, but some of those are credits. Costs to date. Design's been $1.5 million. Our share of the base project's $4.956 million. So total costs due, $6.456 million. Now from this slide to this slide, we have about $2.4 million in parentheses. I'm saying overpaid because some of that is a credit. That is what reduces our base project to $800,000. And I got a slide that gets a little bit more in detail in just a minute. I will tell you that the Corps has about 40 accountants working on this thing, and Bill and Rob and I are trying our best to keep up. Financial analysis. So on the betterments, we've got the Gatewell at McCall Road. Estimated $736,000. The bid came in at $2.2 million. That's 100% our share because that Gatewell is ours. Betterment 2 at Hayes and Casement. We have a 70-30 split now. The Corps has come to us and said, we understand costs are significantly more than we thought. We're willing to help to go to a 70-30 split. Now that 15% doesn't sound like a lot, but it's about $1.25 million. It's a big number. So the Corps has really stepped up. They're really trying to help us out with that Gatewell that came in significantly over budget. Betterment number 3 is the riprap, and this is actually something that has been on our yearly inspection for about a decade. The Corps has been generous enough to let us not put riprap on there until this project. And what that saved us was, 1, a big payment 10 years ago, but 2, we also got some economies of scale because we have a contractor in the area doing work. We don't have to mobilize a second contractor. It also keeps us from damaging that new riprap with a new contractor. So once that riprap's in place, we're done and out of there for 30 years, and that riprap can stay right where it should be. Betterments number 4 is our Ped Ramps. If you remember, we're going to add some pedestrian ramps over by the animal shelter, and we're going to add another ramp kind of by Big Lakes, between Big Lakes and Casement and Hayes. Total on that's 163,000. 81 is what it bid at, so we got a pretty good price there. Total betterment's about 10.5 million. There is some contingencies on that, like with every project. That comes out to 1.056. Total due, we had estimated about 6.6 million. Our total due is about 11.6. So our delta is 4.983. And in just a second, we'll talk about how the Corps is going to help us eat that a little bit, and then what our financing options are down the road. So our base project, base estimated was 11.4 million, came in at 14.1. 35% of this number is ours, comes to 4.9. There was some utility relocations, so like Blue Township, some spots out at Hunter's Island where we have utilities go up and over the levee. Obviously those have to be raised because now the levee is going to be 2 to 3 feet taller. So we have some utility relocations, comes into about 2.152 million. 7.5% CE for the relocations, 161,000. Total utilities about 2.3 million. Minus our previous payments, we have that excess of 2.4 million. The Corps is actually going to allow us to take our excess and put it towards this project. Typically, that would not be the case. Typically, those monies would go in escrow, and in 5 years, when the project's done, we'd add up all the costs, all the betterments, all of our payments, minus our payments. We would hope to get a check back in 5 years. The Corps stepped up and said, we're willing to take some of those dollars, not put them in escrow, and help you with the down payment on this thing. So our total due on the betterments is only 814,000 as opposed to about 6 million. So we paid some in, they're willing to help us a little bit with a down payment on that, and that's what that 1.5 million is. This is a very busy slide. This actual spreadsheet's about 30 inches long. It's pretty complex. But this is what we've broken down from what we've got from the Corps as far as payments, base, utility relocations. Total authorized was this 30.176 million, which is what we've talked about for the better part of a decade. 35% of that number is the 10.5. Then we add in our betterments. Total of all the betterments, city share has bid 11.6. Total bid, all items. So this is the total contract that the Corps is managing, 29.62 million. So financing. Due to the overruns, the USAC has offered to help us offset costs in 2 ways. One, they're willing to go a 70-30 split on the Gatewell. Cuts our portion about $1.2 million. Also, contingencies in CE that we would typically pay up front, which is about $2 to $3 million of contingencies. We typically would pay those up front. Those funds would go into escrow. At the end of the project, the accountants would get to it. They'd add up all the pluses and minuses. We would hope by 2026 to get a check back from the Corps. Instead of that, the Corps has offered to let us pay these contingencies throughout 2022 as quarterly payments. So in essence, they've given us basically a 0% interest loan through 2022 to help us come up with these dollars. Not only is that a big deal because it's an interest-free loan, also with our $1.66 surcharge, we're generating about $100,000 to $120,000 a month. We can use those dollars to help buy that down. So time is a benefit for us here. So what are our options for funding this? Well, this year we implemented a $1.66 surcharge. If you remember, we came before this board in October of last year, took that estimate that we had at that time, we divided by the total number of ERUs, we came up with $1.66. That was going to be net zero revenue. Every dollar we generated from the $1.66 was going to go to pay the bill for 20 years on a 20-year bond. Well, with costs that we have, that $1.66 generates roughly $1 million a year with a yearly bond payment now estimated at about $1.5 million. So we've got a $500,000 delta. Leaving the surcharge at $1.66 does significantly affect future CIP items, and I've got a table here to talk about that. If we were to make this revenue neutral, one option would be to raise that $1.66 next year to $2, and then in 2023 to $2.50. That would be a revenue neutral point, or somewhere very close to $2.50. That would generate the needed $1.5 million to make that 20-year mortgage payment. Again, we'll develop a full funding scenario in December for a rate discussion, bring it back before you so we can show you exactly what that funding scenarios look like. One thing I do want to repeat, the $1.66 will pay the bills. We will have to put off some future items. So, our future CIP items. This column is the original CIPs where we had them based on our flattening scenario. This column is where we would move those projects out to $2.50. And then this is if we stay at the $1.66. You can see there's about 5 to 10 years worth of projects that we would have to move out. A lot of those are directly related to downtown. So what is our recommendation? Our recommendation is concur with United States Army Corps of Engineers on award of contract to ESI, who's the low bidder. ESI has done hundreds of millions of dollars worth of work with the Corps of Engineers. They know what they're doing. This is kind of their specialty. That low bid amount was $29.62 million. We also are recommending we award all the betterments and utility relocations. We accept the 30/70 cost share that the Corps has offered for the betterments. We authorize payments to USACE for the betterments, for the remaining share of our utility relocations, and then we authorize those installment payments through 2022. Now, before I stand for questions, there's two things I want to bring up. One is timeline. Right now, we anticipate heavy construction starting January, February, March next year. We anticipate about a 30-month construction window. So that gets us to fall, winter of 2024. And I do want to talk for just a minute about Mayor Butler's comment last week about the 10-gallon bucket, because you hit it right on the head. Infrastructure we put in upstream of the levee is your 10-gallon bucket. We have to get all of that water through the levee, which is your 5-gallon bucket. We can spend all the money we want to in the downtown east watershed. It still has to get through the levee. The levee is the bottom of the drain. And if we don't make that drain bigger, any money we spend upstream is just going to get water there quicker. So your analogy last week about Aggieville with the buckets was spot on. So I did want to mention that. So with that, I'll stand for questions.
So Brian, in what way did the levee fail in '93? Obviously, the Northview area was affected by the blue flooding, and Dix was on the wrong side of the levee. There's no levee for the Dix addition. Where and how did the levee fail in '93?
So two areas. One is the levee was designed with freeboard, with 2 to 3. So in a 100-year event, there should be about 3 feet of freeboard from the water surface elevation to the top of the levee.
Okay.
That didn't happen. We had about 4 inches of freeboard.
Okay.
Another 4 inches, water goes over. Number one. And number two, that was only a 75-year event. If it would have been a 100-year event, you would have raised that water surface profile, water would have went over the levee.
Okay. And so nothing that we're going to do with this project is anything to make the people of Raspberry and Dix and those places any less likely to flood in '93.
That is correct.
Okay.
Commissioner Hassel, I want to add to Robot, Director of Public Works. So you kind of see where the confluence, Brian, maybe you can move your mouse by the water treatment plant. So there was also sand boils that occurred in '93. So you can kind of see on the graph there where there's under seepage berms that are going to be added. Again, water is trying to equalize itself from the wet side to the dry side. So not only is this project raising the elevation of the levee, it is structurally making it stronger as well. That's what the relief wells do, and that's what some of the stabilization berms do, is it makes it structurally stronger from a geotech aspect so that the reliability and the performance will be there for us in unfortunately probably the next time we have a 1% event or 100-year. So there was other things other than just the freeboard that Brian spoke of that we would consider deficient.
Okay, so now explain to me what a sand boil is.
So a sand boil, essentially what happens is water's trying to find a path from the wet side to the dry side. So it begins to try to equalize. And it'll go underneath the clay blanket of the levee or the core of the levee. And it'll begin to pop up on the dry side. And what it's trying to do is create a channel to move material. So it kind of looks like a mushroom, and all of a sudden water starts bubbling out. And what's dangerous about it is that those sand boils, once they begin to move material, that means it's like be like an underground cavern that could occur underneath the levee because material is disappearing. And what you don't want to have is that top of the levee sump or have a sinkhole, a mini sinkhole that lowers the elevation of the levee, and obviously the water surface is at a certain elevation, then it could come over the top of the levee as well, so.
So a great example of a sand boil, there's two of them. One is really close. The dam at Tuttle Creek, there's a channel in the middle of it where water is running all the time. That's a controlled sand boil. The water from the wet side is pushing under the dam and going into that creek. That's controlled. What these are is uncontrolled. And another example, if you've ever seen video of dam failures where the water comes through the middle of the dam and it's a real small hole and then it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, that's another type of sand boil. That's exactly what Rob was talking about, where that water collects material as it goes through that dam face and then the dam slumps. That's what happens with the levee too.
Very good explanation, thanks.
And just had one other question on the betterments, because my memory may be wrong on this, but I don't have a problem with the betterments that take care of these wells and things, but are some of those related to the trail and access? And
Yeah, that's these right here. Those Ped Ramps. And that 81,000 actually identified through Eddie's Park and Rec.
Okay, so that's
Correct.
already been taken care of, because I
Correct.
just didn't want to see the $1.66 fee on
Correct.
the water thing be
Yeah.
used for trails, so.
And if I had last October's PowerPoint, Rob had a really great slide where he deducted and added and did
That's
all
what
of that.
that's what I thought. That refreshes my memory. And then when you do this final budget analysis, I guess it could include, other than trying to raise the water rates more, which is not my favorite, but I don't really have a problem with this targeted thing specifically for the levy, to look at that, new economic development sales tax, because we did tell the voters if they voted for that, it would go 70% to infrastructure, and that would offset our ability to, add more, property tax to them and water bills and things. So I think that should be considered anyway for the.
And a huge portion of what's protected by the levee is in Pot County, there's no doubt. This whole area protected by the levee.
Yeah, and of course, that's included in that.
Yep.
And then I agree with a lot of people in the city have made the comment that, well, this doesn't help us with Dick's Addition and all that. And of course, that's 100% correct. I mean, we're not building a bigger levee to protect that part of the city. And some of them may wonder, well, what benefit are they getting out of it? And I just like to remind everybody, and Rob already showed, you had the pointer where the water plant is. If we lose the water plant, then everybody in the city loses water, and it's something we can't recover from. So there is a benefit. Yes, it's not as great as some of the other people in town.
That's very
But
true.
it is still a benefit to the Northview area. Go ahead.
Mayor, if I could just add real quick, you made mention of raising the water rate. I want to be real clear. When we came to this board last year and we talked about those rate increases, it was stormwater, water, and wastewater. Right now, Randy and I believe on the water and wastewater side, the adjustments that we made in 2020 that took effect for 2021, right now we believe that they are sufficient for this levee project. It's really the stormwater component, the surcharge, that we believe isn't going to be sufficient unless you begin to do what Brian did, which is sliding projects further out and so forth. So I just wanted to clarify that we do.
Yeah, and I hope we don't have to slide the projects. What I'm saying is see if we can get some of those economic development funds, because we said we were going to use them for infrastructure, because I agree that this flooding thing is, serious to everybody, and I don't want to see those projects delayed. I mean, we got to get that water out of here.
Yeah.
And we're making great progress, but I don't want to slow it up.
Could you point out, Brian, where the railroad issue is?
Sure, yeah, and it's actually shown on the map in this purple color, this
Right,
stop
where
log
is it?
gap. So
Okay, I just can't.
the tracks come through the levee about 4 feet below the top of the levee, and we have to build
Okay.
some sort, currently today we go out there and we sandbag it. And the existing height of the levee actually exceeds what the Corps would recommend for a sandbag gap. So we're looking at doing possibly what's called a stop log gap or a swing gate. We're looking at several different scenarios. The issue is we just don't have the permit yet from the railroad. We're still working with their engineering folks on what the best way is to seal that gap system so we don't get a leak through there. There's all sorts of scenarios that you can use to seal them. Sandbags, larger bags, water bags, stop gaps, swing gates. The question is, what's the best for this scenario?
So obviously the railroad track was, the railroad track was there before the levee was?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, about 1907.
Oh, shit.
In fact, there's a cutout in the levee for the railroad
Yep.
train. And it's physically lower than the top of our levee. So in the 1960s, when the levee was built, that notch, they did not, the Union Pacific Railroad did not raise the track, nor, I mean, obviously the bridge is a very short distance.
Bridge would have to go up too. Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you, I just couldn't find it on my map.
Yeah, it's right here. It's actually, if you ever go out to the boat ramp, you can see it from the boat ramp.
Yep, yep. And I know that there's a railroad bridge over there. I know
Yes.
they abandoned one also. But
Down
this is
here.
Still remaining. Okay,
There's
thank
an
you.
abandoned one down here. You can still see the piers on it when you're on the trail.
Okay, all right. Well, it's just essential that we protect the city, and certainly we tried to do that, I don't know, 50 years ago, what year? And it's important that we shore it up, and I wish there were a solution for the Northview area. I just have to support this, and if there's another solution, that'd be the best scenario, but I'm not sure how to get it.
No, I was going to say, so the levy was accepted at least a couple of years ago, and the bids came in greater than what was expected, right? For the at least
Correct,
betterments
yeah.
and such, 25% greater is what was said.
Yeah, it bid in, I believe, in August. Yeah.
Okay, and our share is, when you say 35%, it's the 10.5
Yeah.
10.5 million.
35% of the base project, which is estimated still at this 30 million, and then plus the betterments, so the 11.6.
Right. And the rest of it is federal.
Correct.
Okay. All right. I think, when we were talking about this, first of all, we weren't expecting to get it. And then when we did, we knew there was going to be a city share component to it. So it's a little bit greater than what we had anticipated. But I believe it's very necessary for the short term and long term as we continue to grow and improve and we take up more of those spaces because of development
Yeah.
and all kinds of mitigation efforts that we're trying to take.
Yep.
So, I would support this, and I think the options you gave are feasible as well.
Thank you.
I think we have to do it, so, thank you.
Okay, do we have any public comments? A few folks in the audience. Don't see any public comments, so we'll bring it back to the commission. I wanted to just clarify on the motion here, what we're doing is two things. We're making it so that this can be passed on one reading due to extingent circumstances. Can we clarify exactly what those are so the public knows?
So the request is to waive your typical two readings of an ordinance provision and pass this on first reading. The Corps is under a short deadline towards the end of this fiscal year, and we need to approve it with this meeting, and that be your final determination, as opposed to waiting for two readings of an ordinance, which we need for additional bonding authority.
Okay, that makes sense to me. Plus, the Corps really helped us out on a couple of these things like you passed out,
Yeah.
so I don't see any reason why we shouldn't do that, so.
Motion?
Yep. we can do that.
All right, lost my, so, I move that we waive the second reading of the ordinance number 7550 due to exigent circumstances and allow for ordinance number 7550 to be considered for final action with one reading.
Second.
Okay, City Clerk, we have a motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Commissioner Morse?
Yes.
Commissioner Hattasol?
Yes.
Commissioner Estabrook?
Yes.
Commissioner Reddy?
Yes.
Mayor Butler?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you.
Mayor, I move that we authorize city administration to formally concur with the USACE on award of the Manhattan Levee Flood Risk Management Project SM 1813 to the low bidder ESI Contracting to accept and contract for each of the optional betterment and utility locations listed in the bid to make $12,432,381 in total payments to the USACE as currently invoiced, and authorize staff to pay future contingency invoices from the USACE totaling $1,907,208. Approve ordinance number 7550, amending the financing of the betterments portion of the project, and approve resolution numbers 092121-H and 092121-I, authorizing financing for the relocation of sewer SS2013 and water WA2017 and WA2018 utilities related to the project.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. City Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Hattasol?
Yes.
Commissioner Estabrook?
Yes.
Commissioner Reddy?
Yes.
Mayor Butler?
Yes.
Commissioner Morse?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Okay, good job reading that, Aaron. That was one of the longer ones. Appreciate that. That brings us to the end of the meeting. Thank you for attending tonight, and the meeting is adjourned.